So ecological succession, is what we usually shorten it to. Succession is also going to dictate which populations and the population numbers within your ecosystem. And succession itself, definition, series of predictable changes in which distinctive species, they either begin an entire ecosystem or they return it back to normal after some sort of disturbance. Fancy way of saying that is it's a series of species replacements where some species come into an area and then some generations later, for example, or next season later, they're replaced by another, and then those are replaced by another. And depending on where in the world you are, you're going to see some predictable ways in which life's going to return to some wiped out piece of land. Okay, so we'll talk about this. The time scale varies. It could take years, it could take decades, it could take centuries. So primary succession is occurs on surfaces that are initially devoid of soil. That means it's a brand new piece of land, or it can be a brand new piece of land if it's natural. For instance, when there's a volcanic eruption, everything gets covered in lava that when it cools, it's brand new rock, right? Igneous rock, not soil, nothing's ever grown there before. Or it can be when a glacier first melts, and you've got initial land, or it could be an artificial one, like when humans come in and we cover everything in cement, for example. So initially devoid of soil. There's a characteristic pattern, a characteristic way that life comes back. And usually what happens first, you've got this exposed rock. Nothing can really live on just rock, except for lichen. Lichen, I have a picture of it in the next slide. Like this, there's a bunch of different types of lichen. This is lichen. Some lichen's prettier. This is more likely the lichen that we were talking about when we're talking about the lichen that first grows on rock. They can latch on and they can grab rock minerals from it. Lichen is itself a little symbiotic organism. It's got a photosynthetic component to it, and it's got you can tell that it looks like a fungus, right? So it's got two components to it, producer plus fungus. And so yeah, it can live on the rock because it's photosynthetic, and then the fungus part lets it latch on and absorb some rock minerals, for example. All right, so lichens grow first. It's what we call a pioneer species. The pioneers are the first ones there, first one to colonize. Lots of time goes by, lichen grow, lichen die. They leave behind nutrients. They leave behind some carbon nutrients, nitrogen nutrients. They keep growing. Eventually, the cycle of their growth and death starts building little foundations for soil. And they start to break up little pieces of the rock to make pieces of the soil. So now you're starting to get some soil. You're starting to get recycling nutrients. Now you can start growing some small weeds, stuff that needs, some nutrients, not too much. And they grow and die, and they start to cycle their nutrients. In the meantime, the exposed rocks get pummeled, get weathered a little more. All of this stuff contributes to making soil. The next, generation, whatever, of soil is good enough to let bigger grasses grow. And then depending on which biome you're at, if possible, shrubs will come in. So in our chaparral, we'll have some shrubs. This will be sort of maybe an end stage for our biome. If you're in other regions where it's warm and wetter, you might have some forests starting to grow. And of course, you're going to have a combination of all of these, but we just mean that the forests are more dominant. There's more of them. And then if you're lucky enough to be, this looks like a deciduous forest, kind of biome, you'll have some bigger forest. That's the most predominant of all of these producers. And let's say this is the deciduous forest. If you've got broadleaf forest, you've reached the climax community for this particular biome. If you're in a rainforest, you keep going. You keep getting, rainforesty trees. If you're in the tundra, you kind of stay down here at lichens and mosses. It just depends on which biome you're at. Secondary succession occurs in areas that were disturbed somehow but have not lost their soil. So there's a fire, for example. So you still have soil. That means your soil has nutrients. Once you've got nutrients, the growth can go a little bit faster. I don't need to start off with lichen. They don't have to create soil for me, right? So now I've got soil, weeds can start to grow. Weeds don't need a lot of nutrients, but they grow, they die, they grow, they die. They start to add some nutrients to this region. And then you can notice it's the same pattern as in primary succession, like except for the lichen and mosses, except for this part right here. So weeds, larger grasses, shrubs, start to grow forest, weeds, grasses, shrubs, forest, big forest. So it tends to be faster here. And this is important, for example, in forests. So forest fires right now, right? But even in our biomes, forests, fires can wipe out the soil, or not the soil, can wipe out the region, but as long as we still have soil, if you let the place recover, it will recover. Just leave it, we gotta leave it alone, humans. Nitrogen fixers, like these lupines, but it could be any legumes really, are great at helping forests recover more quickly. Forests that have been destroyed by fires recover more quickly, because they're nitrogen fixers. And remember, nitrogen is a limiting nutrient in regions. And so if they're nitrogen fixers, they grow, they fix nitrogen easily in their roots, they grow, they die, immediately start recycling nutrients right there. There's some regions that have organisms that are adapted to fires, of course, especially like our chaparral. But in bigger forests, you have these really interesting lodgepole pines. And they look like these tall, skinny things. Turns out that their seeds, nice and hard and closed, great adaptation because it's covered in some sort of waxy material. And when there's a fire, that waxy material melts off, exposes the seed, able to reestablish a whole new lodgepole pine forest.